What?
Yeah.
Yeah. Best of 3 round 1. Single game format for conference semifinals, conference finals, and MLS Cup. Like what? Why? Why? Like nobody cares about these games.
I really thought that they would switch it after the first year.
Yeah, they should have done 3 games for the wild card, 5 games
7
for the DS, and then 7 games for the CS.
Yeah.
Yeah.
7-game final.
7-game series, MLS Cup final. Yeah, then it will be a legitimate tournament.
over
be
a
kind of
7-week span.
to see how they would react to having to run, like, for having 3 games in a row, 3 days. It's like, in game 1, would they just jog around and like not really run? It'd be like those Olympic cycling events where it's not based on time, so it's like the first 90% of the race is them just going slowly around the track, because it's like a chess match of who is going to break first.
Right.
So everyone's saving energy. They could do that with a 7-game soccer series, where in game 1 everyone is just competitively trying to not expend too much energy. It's like every player on the field is Messi.
What about the bullpen game?
That could be good too. I mean, hell, we might as well just have unlimited NCAA style subs at this point.
Yeah, that's underrated as like a moment that utter woke nonsense took hold, as when they just said, oh yeah, we're gonna do 5 subs permanently.
It's Alex!
Well, it's episode 282. Let's just jump straight into it. This is the end of season episode, I guess. The season ended. We just, sat down Ludovico style and watched all the highlights for all the games in the last month or so in the Red Bulls season. That is everything from the Derby onwards until Fan Appreciation Day against the Columbus Crew at home. You, the viewer, the listener, although maybe you're viewing it in your mind palace as you listen to us.
Maybe you're just watching a screen of the logo on YouTube.
Yeah. In which case, salute to you. You, the listener, will have known the results by now. All of them losses except for a win against Toronto, which, okay, we'll take it, I guess. But the season is over. It is so over. And now we're facing a playoff series, weirdly enough, against our last opponent, Columbus Crew. But what a way to go out with a whimper.
We finally broke our funk.
Oh, yeah?
No more draws. Finally,
That's
some
true.
losses.
Finally some clarity.
We are finally being punished for our misdeeds. you
Yeah,
know?
that's true. Well, I think the headline event here, of course, is the Derby game, which was a gazumping, to say the least, 5-1 loss. And
The first Derby game available to the public I've not been to.
wow.
Yeah.
End of an
Well, you
era.
picked a good one.
I did. I was sick. I was trying to go.
And this also stood out a little bit too, because as Peach has alluded to, we've been drawing everything this season mostly and sort of in a zone-esque manner, avoiding actually getting properly blown out. And this certainly changed the pattern. I think by my count, we have at least 2, if not 3 goals that are just outright mistakes here that really get it started. But yeah, this feels like one of the more likely candidates to be a hallmark game in terms of trying to define the legacy of this season. I think if you ask someone in a few years to try to jog their memory about the 2024 season, strong chance this game is the only thing they might remember. Or, I don't know, maybe there'll be a memory of like the decent start in March generically across a couple games. But in terms of individual results, this has got to be up there, unfortunately. Were any of us there in person? No. Well, that's that. And I think there's some nice poetry to this game as well, because immediately after the game ended, we got the good news, which is the New York Red Bulls had clinched a playoff spot
God damn it.
for the 14th
Fucking
team in
did
a row.
it, Joe. Yeah.
15th year in a row? I don't know. Which
Our streak continues.
leads me to think that the theme for this episode is not only it is so over, but also simultaneously never forget that nothing ever happens. Because something happened and then immediately it was over and then nothing continued to happen because the Red Bulls still made the playoffs. And, you know, it's for me, it's...
The listener will find out that nothing happening will be a recurring theme in this episode.
Yeah, I mean, nothing ever happens. That it's kind of hard to talk about this game because in the one sense, yeah, I believe everything I just said about it being a rare milestone or hallmark for this season, but also I don't really believe it'll have any sort of ongoing effect or actually serve as any sort of embarrassment to make management or the team perform any differently.
You're saying that Jurgen Klopp isn't going to see this result and then immediately become
Oh, God, I
furious?
forgot about that.
Did he quote unquote come on board before or after that
After
Derby game?
that game, I
After.
think.
Okay, so he has an excuse to have
So for the audience
not been watching.
and also myself, can we review what exactly the Jurgen Klopp
Explain to the
event
folks
is?
at home who
Yeah.
is Jurgen Klopp?
But actually, though, he's
he's
taken
a-
over Mario Gomez's job.
I don't...
Mario Gomez is now the Julian de Guzman
Well, I was going to say,
of Red Bull Global.
isn't Mario Gomez still there? He's actually more like... Yeah, this is like when Kevin Thelwell came...
And Dennis Hamlet
And Dennis
stayed.
Hamlet was still here.
Yeah.
But it's not as cool as Billy Epler, is what I'm
Leading the
gathering.
Mets.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Jurgen Klopp is the new.
I mean, not we've used this analogy before, and I don't want to lean on baseball too much, but it came up again today that Mets baseball executive David Stearns, who, like Brit just said, came in while the Mets already had a GM, Billy Epler, similar to what Peaches said about Thelwell and Hamlet and Gomez and Klopp. But David Stearns, when Billy Epler left, he did not make up some bullshit that was a real role that he needed to replace. He just went ahead and kept winning games. Red Bull, no respect for people's intelligence on every level.
As we've seen from this season, the points aren't real and there are no stakes. So
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like this Klopp thing, I mean, even in some of the like press releases and stuff from, Red Bull themselves were basically saying like, oh yeah, he's not going to be in the office like every day or even every week or whatever. This is just kind of
A cushy-
oversight thing.
Okay. I'm going to confess another thing here. I never read past any of the headlines for Klopp leaving Liverpool. I still don't even know why he left Liverpool. He was just done with it.
He was doing his whole shtick about like, oh, I'm Mr. wholesome hippie guy too, and I need to go live life, and I'm definitely not going to manage again because it's more important to like be with my family and stuff like that. I'm not going to take any jobs ever. But then when apparently in Germany, Red Bull's viewed even more, as a villain than, we see it here in New York. Like, they're considered like the boogeyman as far as like completely changing the economics and culture of German football. And for Klopp, who's Mr. like, goody goody, like, progressive, like I believe in all the, positive do-gooder things about soccer, for him to do all that posing about leaving Liverpool and then accept this stupid bullshit job for the most, nefarious corporation in soccer is pretty rich.
I think it's actually a little bit in line.
You'll probably read through some of my tone just now that I've always found Klopp a little bit annoying. But go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say I think it's in line with him, like from a self-serving standpoint of like, yeah, getting to spend more time with his family and working less. Like that does
Right.
seem to be like the modus operandi at Red Bull.
Well, it seems, yeah, I mean, he seems like a mascot, just like Mario Gomez being quote unquote put in charge seemed like just a cosmetic mascot thing.
Right,
Like,
and Klopp does kind of almost feel like the ultimate version of what like Red Bull wanted to aspire to,
Right.
like in facade at least, right? So I don't know. Maybe he saw what happened with Christian.
and even more in that respect, like what's he going to change about the way Red Bull operates already? If all their tactics and everything is already
He's going to
modeled
make it
on what
all a
Klopp
little bit
does.
better. It's very corporate, actually, if you think about it. But I was going to say, like, maybe you just saw what Christian Horner was up to at Red Bull Racing, and he's like, wow, I can just live out the rest of my life here and with no regrets.
He was like, I want to live like that guy. I
Yeah, exactly.
I want to make his choices. And
Wait till you read his texts.
yeah, I was going to protest, about the most nefarious corporation in football. But then I realized that the government of Saudi Arabia and Qatar are sovereign nations and not corporations. So fair enough. But I will say, I'll give it to Red Bull that they have invented a sort of uncanny middle tier in between managing a club, which is a real job, and managing a nation, which is not really a real job. Managing like an amorphous consultancy sort of firm that hovers in between the two is like a new sort of, Don DeLillo character in the world of football there, where you aren't really managing a team every single day, and you're not in charge of an actual nationality, but you are vaguely in charge of other clubs and other teams beneath you. So congrats to Ralph Ragnick once again for paving
Designing
the way.
the perfect monster.
Yeah. I
look forward to his work on the city of Lyon.
Yesterday on YouTube, I did get recommended a video. I didn't realize, I haven't gotten to this part of Better Call Saul, but apparently in Better Call Saul, they elaborate and have a longer scene of the German guy tasting all the ketchups before he kills himself. And I feel like this is the algorithm speaking to the moment for what's going on in Red Bull. But it is farcical to me, the idea that Klopp has any focus at all on what would have happened in the Derby, though, here in New York.
It it went downhill after they changed the red flavor of Red Bull from cranberry to watermelon.
Is that the actual flavor profile?
It's watermelon now.
All right.
Yeah.
You do learn something on this podcast, after all. But for the match itself, I will say that it did strike me that even though this is, I think, our worst loss ever in the Derby, listeners may not be shocked that I'm a little bit numb to that. But I think that also speaks to a bigger weird spot that both New York teams in the league is in right now. And it strikes me that I think that all of this period now until City opens their stadium is going to be completely forgotten. Like, I think this is going to be and that's assuming that the period after that is notable and that like MLS has a healthy league and club culture afterwards at all, which maybe it won't. But I think that like right now, both of these teams feel very adrift, and especially compared to 2015-ish when the rivalry was really fresh and the amity between the fan bases is very strong. Right now, I don't even have a strong picture in my mind of like who NYCFC fans are to be annoyed at.
Yeah. Also, well, I think the one thing in the match that seemed evident to me was like in the past, I feel like a lot of the Derby match wins we've had came from motivation and effort a lot of the times, and that was just so clearly lacking in this version of this team, which I think strikes like to the larger emphasis of like how this season is felt of there not being any motivation or like material results that matter. This long season ending with a lot of draws every time, we drop points and not really like affecting our
I don't
standings.
even know if it's not motivated as much as just like everybody's been on autopilot since they dropped out of being in a shield race. Like I warned was probably going to be a major slip.
But like it's also, I think, to this matchup where it's like there's no motivation for this either. Where it's like,
nobody's
it's
fired
like
up for it as opposed to any other game compared to like Brit was saying at the peak, like 10 or even more like 7-8 years ago.
But I do feel like the City team had a little bit of like fire under their butts to win this game to an extent that we don't.
They seem like a healthier club that's operating with a little more purpose than we are right now. They're actually bringing in new bodies instead of just like having guys held around intermittently and sold arbitrarily.
They're not even that good. which is the weird thing. Like,
Right.
they ended up finishing the league one spot above us, which is sort of remarkable that they didn't finish higher above us.
Well, they
given
they
how-
nosedived in the beginning of the season.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
so.
And then they had a pretty like high, like just like good run of form. And then I feel like they've just like
I think
been
they plateaued off again, though.
yeah.
I do just want, since it's brought up, I do, as I posted online, I was pretty damn accurate with my predictions at
You
the
were.
beginning of the year with my table, like top and bottom, and just where people were. And I do want to just say, I think I picked RBNY to be like 8th, and we finished 7th or whatever.
You
But,
did,
like,
yeah.
I was fair
In the ballpark.
I was fair.
Yeah.
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 Like I'm not saying they're the worst team in the league, but they're certainly not very good. And yeah, that all kind of played out.
I am surprised that Philadelphia actually managed to be bad enough to miss playoffs
Yeah,
entirely.
that was the one team that I missed pretty bad. Yeah.
Did you have them
I had
near
them
the top?
I had them at least like in playoffs, maybe even in front of us a little bit. Yeah.
I mean, I guess it just goes to show that this season drawing went a long way, because we have won 3 games in our last 20 matches. And if
Yeah,
that's
it
not
somehow didn't drop us
if that's not
even
enough
into
to
like the
drop
bubble.
out
Yeah.
of the playoff risk at any point, like what would it have taken? Like what did
Yeah.
Philly do to pull that off? It's sort of
I
crazy.
think the only thing that I think you had Philly where Charlotte ended up.
That sounds about
and
right,
Charlotte
yeah.
out, because
Right.
that would be pretty intuitive call.
I mean,
Yeah.
it really does feel like not making the playoffs is like relegation zone level football in
Yeah.
this league, right? Like, you gotta really not be winning very, 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 very often.
It seemed like a really pretty, at least in the East. I don't follow foreign leagues like the Western Conference. At least in the East, it seemed like a very flat table this year, even by MLS standards. Like there was Miami and Columbus and Cincinnati racking up a lot of points, but everybody else was just kind of in the doldrums.
You're gonna have to be careful, Cork. People are gonna pick up on the Sun Trail that once the Metro up, you've actually been working your pen at writing the script for the plot of MLS seasons.
Yeah,
You know.
it's true. I'm one of the Apple producers.
Yeah,
Ending the season with 47 points also feels suspiciously not terrible to me. Like, I mean, I guess we started the season all right. I'm just thinking back to, like, you know, when we started this podcast, we had our finger on the pulse a little bit more of like what a minimum sense of points you needed to get to the playoffs and like maybe when the Shield was. And when we started this podcast, it was like 50 is sort of minimum and 60 was the record at the time. And then we broke the record in 2018, and now a couple other teams have broken the record again. And 47, I guess, like, you know, is still sort of marginal, but like I'm surprised how we don't have even fewer points than that, given how terrible our form has been.
I should know this, but who won the Shield?
And Miami won the
Miami.
Shield. They
Okay,
did
okay.
have
They did win the Shield.
like
Pretty handily.
6-point face off with Columbus, like 2 or 3 matches.
What
before
was
the
their
end of the
point
season.
total?
74.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
yeah, even at the top, like pretty flat table this
Yeah.
year. Yeah.
Yeah, after Orlando to us, so 4th through 7 is 5-point spread.
Like, I can't help. How many draws did Chicago have that one season where they had the record?
No, I don't know. Maybe like 20 something.
I can't imagine what that season felt like with them like doing that and also kind of being at the bottom of the table, whereas our season we just kind of did that and maintained a playoff spot. you know?
Nothing ever happens.
Yeah. And now we have a 3-game series
The
oddly
only 3-game
enough,
series in the playoffs.
against the team we just played. And we tried to figure this out right before we pressed record, but I don't know if anything was actually really decided on decision day. I guess we determined that DC dropped out of the playoffs on the last day.
DC, Montreal, and Atlanta were all like vying for like 8 and 9.
But nothing in the New York Columbus game
No.
really mattered.
And once upon a time, I would have been able to tell you very intuitively, like, who 1 through 6 in the conference was and what the playoff field was. To me, it just seems very obvious that the league has got to contract the playoffs again. This is not compelling stuff.
Yeah.
And as we're recording tonight, the playoffs have actually technically started because of this new format they've done. They like have 1 or 2 games every day for the whole next week.
What they are calling, by the way, one of the worst playoff performances of all time. I don't know what the results were. I just saw that as a tweet.
Yeah, but like, who cares?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. Who cares? Like,
Right, like I didn't bother to look into like what
that's
actually
also
happened.
not aggregate score anymore.
It blunts the regular season too, because it just like what happened to us. Like we were just saying, you can play like shit most of the year, and you'll still just be right there in the middle of it. And
Yeah.
it's really gotten out of whack.
But yeah, and I mean, it is sort of refreshing to watch Columbus play though, because that's an actual soccer team.
Yeah.
And I have to say, I kind of find myself having a soft spot for them these days. And I mean, this last month of games to end the season is sort of an interesting cross section of recent rivals for the Red Bulls since 2015. You have City, you have Toronto, Atlanta, and Columbus. And there's just not any juice in any of these games, and it's I think a good contrast to that 2015 to 2018 spell where all those teams at various times were a thorn in our side, or in Columbus's case in 2018, that was sort of the zenith of the club, and we really put a thumping on them at home, 3-0 to get to the Eastern Conference Final. And now that's just not
Ancient
the energy
history.
at all. Yeah. But I mean, I guess it is encouraging to see that Nancy has put together a pretty sharp, focused team. And it's funny that we have to play them 3 times, or I guess potentially only 2 times.
Well, yeah,
It's not
like you
going to
said,
be 3 times.
they're much more annoying and like less enjoyable to watch opponents out there. And like at least I mean, it's always the case even when we're good. It's like if you're gonna get beat by a good team that's respectable.
Yeah.
There are seasons where when it ends, you walk out of the stadium kind of feeling like longingly. I don't think anyone will feel like that about this season.
Well, it hasn't really
once
been like that in 3 or 4 years. I mean,
Yeah.
2021 when that Philly playoff game?
Yeah, probably.
That was the last time. I mean, that was kind of like a conversation point online. Maybe it was like a subreddit thread or something. Like a couple weeks ago, that was just kind of like, when was the last time, it felt like the club was like really going somewhere? And it's like, I mean, at the end of a season, meaning, and at the end of 2021, which, that was, and certainly in contrast to this season, that was a year where club leadership was very explicitly saying like, this is a reset year. This is a rebuild year. We're, kind of playing with house money, and, snuck into the playoffs at the end and then put up a good fight in that Philly game. And it was like, okay, we're kind of building something here. We have a platform. Every year since, it's been the team really sputtering out in the second half, having shitty summer transfer windows, or having the coach, pout the entire second half of the season, and then just a completely limp playoff exit.
Well, I think it especially stands in contrast. I'm thinking obviously from recent a trauma of, it's not, I guess, that traumatic, but like the recent Mets like playoff exit, right? I think it caught the emotions of a lot of people from like the way that the team played, and like the feeling of overachievement maybe at times, or like grittiness, and like you're saying too. I think I felt that about like the Red Bulls at a certain point in certain playoff games, coming at the end of it. Being
In
like,
2021, it felt a little bit that way. Yeah.
yeah, and like there's like a little feeling of destiny or hope, and like, and like I don't look to my sports teams to make me a rational person, like I don't want to just be like, oh, I can deal with this because this was expected, right? Like I want to be overcome with emotion, or like
That's what you watch F1 for, to read the stats.
Exactly. Like to be an aerodynamicist and to explain why everything happened. But like, I don't want to feel so rational about this team, like I don't want to go into a game thinking, oh yeah, that was deserved, or like, oh yeah, like whatever. And like, I don't know what they can do to do like that again, but it's just like there's no, like, I think maybe the league in general, definitely, I think, like, there's no buzz around this regardless of all the messy stuff, right? Like, I don't think people feel like that strong about their teams anymore. There's no coverage from the local things. Like, I don't.
Yeah.
Like,
One thing that crystallized for me the last couple matches is that going to an MLS game these days really does feel pretty much the same as going to any sports game. Like, you have all the same stuff there. Whereas 10 years ago, 5 years ago, like, going to MLS game did feel different, like with the supporters sections, with the just like different rhythm of the game and how everyone is sat down. I think another thing that reminded me of this is going to the Mets watch party that we went to, and how everyone was so locked in to just watching the game on the TV at Citi Field, and how that's pretty different than typical energy for a baseball game. Even like an in-person playoff baseball game, it's different to, like, for everyone just to be watching the screen together and sort of not even chatting that much. And it kind of made me realize how different the atmosphere at Red Bull Arena has been in the last couple of years. And part of that is my, gripes I've made all throughout this season about the experience at RBA being a little bit more superficial and cookie cutter. But I think it's also maybe just a cultural shift in general, where the cultural niche that MLS fills has kind of gone astray, or it's not clear how MLS actually fits into the sporting culture of the country anymore right now. I mean, we all laughed at the fight and win guy back when that was the face of fan culture, but now it's like, what even is the face of fan culture right now? Like, why would I go to an MLS game now instead of just buying a like $10 ticket in the upper deck to go see the Mets, or like go see the Liberty, or something else that I could catch for cheap? There's not an obvious reason.
He's not talking specifically about MLS, but Jonathan Wilson, the English soccer writer, had an interesting column a couple weeks ago where he had one quote that sort of echoed a lot of themes that we've discussed on this show recently regarding the Red Bulls and MLS specifically. But I mean, him saying that, like, globally, in, England, Europe, everywhere. I mean, and I think he even might have hinted that it's happening in other sports too, that, all these entities are happy to just have, high spending tourists who show up to, like, a game or two a year, as opposed to actually building communities and cultures the way sports has more traditionally been. And that's going to kind of rear its head less in some of the more established, more popular sports. For MLS, that's still kind of a marginal thing that still hasn't had that kind of critical mass of people and generations of support and all that kind of stuff. It could be an issue that there's, as we're putting informally, that there's no juice to some of these games and just some of the cultural energy around the league these days.
It will be interesting to see what happens with Las Vegas too, because the one thing that keeps on being mentioned with the A's relocation to there, which seems to constantly be sort of bungled, even as it's confirmed they're leaving Oakland, is that the conventional wisdom, the received wisdom, seems to be that, like, everyone, who goes to an A's game, it'll just be people who are going to the Strip to do Las Vegas stuff, and then they'll catch an A's game to me. And everyone is sort of accepting this as something that will happen. But will that happen? Like, if you're going to go to Las Vegas, you can go see a baseball game that I guess if you don't live in the same city that your favorite team lives in, maybe you would. But it's not obvious to me that this tourism model is, like, actually going to have longevity to it.
It's just a thing, like the hotel concierge will recommend as, like, oh, is there anything I can do today, kind of thing. Like, are you?
Well, it's just
like we're saying, like, is that a way to build your cultural? I mean, I guess in a way, it's like they're trying to, like, how do you make a Yankees hat happen? But, like,
it's obviously it's obviously good for business and good for the margins to do that, or else they wouldn't be doing it. But the whole point is that it's like, it's the exact sort of thing that just, raises the margin, or, raises things marginally and allows people to look good in conferences and stuff like that and get better jobs and everything. Meaning, like, marketing, sales, and front office people. But as far as, like, the actual, long-term term meaning of what sports is and stuff like that, just totally out the window.
Well, I don't necessarily buy the whole like it's a good business move thing or it's a good like investment thing to begin with either, because like these things will fail often, and if you don't make kind of a genuine product in a way, like people won't continue to buy it. Look at Inter Miami's home like attendance.
I don't know if RBNY
like
this year is a good case study for that.
Well, no, I mean, yeah,
I just
but
mean
I'm
this
just like
approach for sports business in general. I'm also skeptical. I mean, I'm not a business person at all, but I just have a kernel of doubt in my head that this is going to make money in the long term too. It just feels like even the top line attraction for it doesn't add up to me. But at the same time, like when you watch the World Series this week, we're going to get all these ads for Google AI, which is a product that we as people cannot even purchase. Like why are they paying millions of dollars to advertise something that we can't even purchase?
And it's just
it's all fictitious. I guess
it's just a service that reads Reddit anyway. If I wanted that, then
it's a service that tells like the stat. That's the thing that's like, if you hit a ball on the ground, you might be out. Like, like, but that's what the money is getting spent on. So who knows? I don't know.
Well, there was one thing I think interesting about Las Vegas, and I think like Orlando might be kind of the thing I was pointing to about like, oh, if there is a Las Vegas soccer team, there might be like, knowing that there are people who have to work the tourism industry in Las Vegas. Like that base is like arguably the one that you should go for. You should market to and like represent. And I think that is like maybe potentially a reliable base of people who would like be a hardcore and dedicated like fan to the product, so long as you're creating an actual product to enjoy.
I feel like I mean tourists. I feel like with tourists is maybe being used a little too literally here, because I don't even think the Wilson
but like
quote
casual fan, I know what you mean.
The Wilson quote I don't think even said tourists specifically. And when I said tourists, I mean specifically just like just casual people like locally. I mean, people who are not like diehards and not actually following the team. People who just see it as like a mindless little night out escape. A couple times a
another
year,
way to spend a night.
Right.
Well, I mean, that's how the club is.
Or something to keep your kids
saying.
occupied for a few hours.
You have nothing better to do because you're a worthless loser who doesn't spend outside.
Well, no, but
time.
like just to be clear, that is an exaggeration, but only a little bit, because like the team's go-to copy they keep on posting every week is, don't have Saturday plans? Well, now you do. It's like, Jesus, now I really want to get Saturday plans instead of doing that. Like, I mean, okay. But
there's, just, since that topic came up too, there's another, like, I guess it's kind of along the lines of what we were just saying, where there was a post today where it was like, it was using like the pointing finger at you emoji. And it was like, players are ready. Are you ready? And it's like, first of all, just like, yeah, like what are you accusing me of or whatever, with like that sort of tone. But also it was linked to this video of like, the players, players are ready. And it was a video where like the first thing was like Forsberg just like, again, and as we clocked in the beginning of the season when he showed up, and just the most like kind of passive, detached kind of like tone in his voice, just like, yeah, well, I thought we took a lot of big steps and the team really developed and stuff, about a team that won 3 of its last 20 games. Like, is there any fucking connection to reality? Does anybody actually have any respect for people's intelligence when they talk about what's being worked on at this club? It's just wild sometimes.
Also, I kind of like that contrast of like, oh, like we're obviously making an effort to gather people who are trying to casually enjoy this night and like have a good thing, but are you ready to put in emotional labor to enjoy this night that like we're gonna like, because you have no other plans to do? There's a little bit of like a weird clash.
The listener should know that I'm pushing my glasses further against my nose to say that's not what emotional labor is. But I did also like the post that was like the week after we lost to City 5-1 at home, that was like, only 2 days till we defend, all caps, our fortress. And it's like, what are you talking about? Our fortress? Like, can we be real with each other? And it's just, again, it's photos that don't look that cool or fun either, if we're being completely honest. But yeah, I thought the protest too much a little bit. You know, one other very funny thing that happened this season is that they went out and went through all of the trouble of loaning Felipe Carballo. Why? Now that the season is over, looking at this, like you could have just waited to the end. Did you actually think it was going to help the team get over the line? I don't know. Like, why did they sell Frankie Amaya? I guess that's just something you do with good players in soccer now. But
not to just like rehash what we were saying at the time during the transfer window, but apparently it very much contextually seemed like that's something that they just threw together in a couple days.
Yeah.
That, because they could, because they wanted to just shut people up for saying like, oh, you're not going to sign anybody. You're not going to sign anybody. Okay, we'll do like the most fucking low, like a lot of things in the club the last few years, the most low effort signing possible. A guy on loan for the last like 6 games of the season. And even with that, they're still trying their real objective. They're still trying to sign this like 19-year-old kid in the Polish second division, and apparently still. And it's just like, is somebody getting bribed for that or something? Like, what is the technical direction?
Honestly, that would be
at this club
relieving.
anymore?
It would be relieving to find out it's all just bungs. Like that would, I'd be like, oh, okay, I get it.
like-
You could have just, it's all just, that we'll find out that the guy behind the Eric Adams crime family Twitter account, RIP, was actually stationed in Hanover. But the funny thing about Caballo as well is that it's a low effort move that looks like the result of a quick Football Manager filter search.
Right.
But they're also paying him like a prorated $1 million salary. It's like not even like the cheapest, like weird, lazy move you could make. Like you're still spending an odd amount of money.
He's still a
DP.
DP, yeah.
If that sounds familiar, it's because I've also said this about Dante Van Zer and in different ways, Alias Manuel. Although, Alias Manuel, I did greatly enjoy his 10-minute streak of scoring offside goals just to show he could. It was like a little tidy.
That's a vintage Red Bull Timo Werner kind of.
You're talking about in the Atlanta game.
In the Atlanta game, yeah. That was like, oh, good for him. All right, I'll take that. And it doesn't count. Great.
Yeah.
Who cares? Like, just keep doing it. Why not? But speaking of Amaya as well, I mean that also makes me realize that when Amaya was getting sold, that was sort of the log off moment for me in this season because he was my favorite player. I would say he was our best player, and it's the moment where the team completely lost its coherence. And I think it's the last moment where I had like a thread of hope that they could like build some sort of coherent structure with this squad of players.
And now it just looks like a random group of individuals.
And now at this point, I look at the field and I see Lewis Morgan, and I'm like, man, we gotta let him go. We gotta let him go,
free.
grow somewhere else. But Alias Manuel, I think like actually we could be a good spot for him to keep sharpening up, and maybe we let him go free next year. But yeah, Morgan, I'm like, I just want him to
thrive.
Yeah, and that's not going to be here. Forsberg, I don't really care what happens with him. I don't feel.
I don't
bad.
think he cares about what's happening with us, obviously.
Yeah.
So.
Although when he's played, he has been like all right, I guess. Like
I mean, I would hope he's all right.
Yeah.
I mean, he's been advertised as like the freaking messiah, and then he skipped 4 months.
It's his house. He's supposed to be all right.
Yeah.
there's someone who's like monkey's paw curled who've requested 3 DPs on this roster, and it's this 3 DPs.
Yeah.
Well, just to add on to the point you were making a minute ago, Brit, about like the salaries and stuff like that. It was actually earlier today. I was just reading some article that was just retrospective on a bunch of team seasons and like their roster makeup and stuff like that. And I was looking at the St. Louis roster, and St. Louis, a team that finished near the bottom of the West. Not really advertising itself as like a big budget, big market club, even as an expansion team. But I was looking, they have like 6 guys who are on 7-digit salaries.
Yeah.
And it's, other than like that Klaus guy, that's like a bunch of dudes who I've never fucking heard of. And it's just like MLS has gone it's such a weird purgatory that like technically MLS it's better than it's ever been, and these guys are all making more money than they ever have, and we're technically signing like higher stock players than we ever have, but it just doesn't feel that way.
The product
on the
isn't
actual
showing, yeah.
field, and it feels wrong that you have these like randos on St. Louis making $1 million, making like 10 times more than like Dwayne De Rosario ever made in a season and stuff like that. It just feels very skewed from what was like, not like I want MLS to like be artificially impoverished or whatever for aesthetic sake or whatever, but it's also just like everything that used to be charming about MLS has been pretty distorted.
It did
lately.
catch my eye that I saw the Red Bull salary dump at a glance as well, and the floor for the ceilings is just like really quietly raised across the bunch. The only name I can really think of off the top of my head is Kyle Duncan, who's like making 500 something, and that's not even that unique. Like a lot of guys are making that amount. And to me, I think that suggests that like just the difference between the
like
grades
Tom Barlow
of
was on like
players,
300,000 when he left.
and it has really sort of decreased. There's almost nobody who's making like a normal person amount of money anymore.
Right.
Which was a lot of the guys like
even like 5 years ago.
Were making like a normal person sort of salary. But that leads me also to my point that I think I've made on here quite a few times, which is that I don't think if Red Bull was just handed like $10 million in salary money that they were forced to spend next year, I don't think that would result in a better team.
Right.
Like, it depends on...
Dante Van Zier is a representative of spending more.
The LA Galaxy have also really not been talked about enough as much as they should, where like they were spending a lot of money for a lot of seasons in a row, and they were terrible for all of them. They had the Dos Santos brothers, they had Chicharito, they had other guys who were like technically famous, but
Atlanta United, who just the league media can't stop talking about, does everything the league always wants you to do, always selling players, always making big signings, stuff like that, and they're always shit.
It's not just the money, it's like hiring smart people, which does also cost money, like hiring good people and like having a sense of purpose and being organized. I mean, honestly, if you're gonna make the league does dust off its like concept of ambition rankings that they do, which is usually capturing the wrong thing. It's usually capturing like, are you trying to sell someone on, or something like that. If that ambition rankings was actually a measure of how much non-salary spending they're doing and like building out club staff and like dare I say even analytics and that sort of stuff, that could actually be an interesting conversation to have.
Well, that was a big part of what made RBNY feel like one of the more big cutting edge clubs in the league only like 4 or 5 years ago. Felt like we had a lot more of that stuff built out, and that's just definitely not the case anymore. When they have like Schneider bumbling around and hiring, De Guzman as like, a training wheels job, and just like all this like totally arbitrary, jobs for the boys that seems like to be going on lately. I mean, to your point, Brit, about, just hiring, spending money to hire, talented people and have like an actual purpose in place. Again, last time it felt like there was any kind of thrust or direction in club was when they had Thelwell here, poaching him from one of the emerging Premier League clubs, and then actually felt like there was a little bit of action going on. There's actually a little bit of kind of shape to this kind of signings that were being made, and it's just been a kind of mess. For better or worse,
and I'm at the
last
point
few years
where I don't think anything's going to change until Red Bull sells.
Yeah, I mean that's where there's technically the team's never been more, integrated with Red Bull and seemingly on the priority, high up on the priority list for Red Bull than it is right now, and it looks terrible.
And
like
there was a report a couple weeks ago that was talking about Red Bull's F1 operation, saying that they got very close to just cutting loose their second F1 team, and at the last minute decided not to. And I think this is all fallout from Matishit's, dying, and it seems like no one is in charge. So maybe in a year, or two, some of these questions the dust will have settled a little bit, but you certainly get a picture of like a bloated corporate landscape where no one really quite feels the authority to make big hard decisions like this. I mean, we also alluded to the Christian Horner thing earlier obliquely, but like the context behind that is that Red Bull's main F1 team had like a huge scandal where the guy should really have been fired, but it seems like there was just a lack of authority anywhere within Red Bull to actually make that happen. And I guess we'll see if that can just hold on forever. Because again, remember, nothing ever happens. So
that I think has affected the team at Red Bull, like racing too, to an extent. Like their performance
they're
has fallen
losing
off.
now. Yeah. So like maybe something will happen.
They've lost their chief car designer.
That's true.
Like things are kind of
which
falling.
makes the Klopp hire even funnier. Actually, that like, I mean, yeah. I don't know.
I'm just remembering now too on the Klopp hire and what you were just saying about the lack of authority at Red Bull, that Mintzlaff was coming off very thirsty in his statements, and just thirsty for what, I'm not entirely sure, but it was very much just like, I'm so freaking excited to get Jurgen Klopp, who is the most important person in soccer and the most important thing Red Bull has ever done and stuff like that. It's just like, who are you talking to, man? What are you trying to prove here?
Yeah.
He's technically, Mintzlaff's supposed to be in charge of like the whole ship, not even just sports now.
Yeah.
So who knows what's going on there?
I think maybe to tie the bow on this and bring it back to where we started, I think maybe we can view the opening of NYCFC Stadium as maybe the next juncture where RBNY might have the opportunity to relaunch itself alongside with that. I sort of think everything until that point is a wash no matter what. Again, I think that's sort of for both teams. I think that NYCFC is also sleepwalking until whenever they open the stadium.
Right.
No one cared that they won their cup. No one cared that we beat them all those years before the time that, they won their cup. I think Liberty had a substantially bigger celebration than NYCFC got. Right. I think it's all, and then I forgot, I honest to God forgot that we're hosting the World Cup in 2026.
Yeah.
You see, I've seen a couple more glimpses of discourse of people being like, oh yeah, the American soccer is in the desert until 2026 and everyone's just crossing their fingers until then, from sources I didn't expect to be saying this. Like Pablo Maurer was like, oh, the league is less interesting than I've ever seen it, which I didn't expect him to be talking like that.
Simon Evans from AP.
Yeah.
Oh, I got an email about how to purchase tickets for the World Cup, by the way. And it was being done like as a right to purchase through digital collectibles. So clearly they had set up a whole NFT scheme like years ago, and that fell apart. Now.
See, but I mean, honestly, I mean, that's why I can't remember if I said it on the show or when we were just chatting before or not, but like, that's the thing about like MLS becoming this like perfect little, like, pile of money that nobody really, feels should have any dignity or whatever. That's just being used as a laboratory for stupid shit like that. I mean, that's what we're in for with MLS and the, age that it's gotten itself into.
I guess San Diego is joining next year, right? And then is that going to be the last expansion?
That's what it sounds like. I mean, it's been another thing too, where it's like, I mean, Garber and whatnot has been kind of hinting that there's not going to be much expansion for a while after San Diego. And then there was a thing where there's been a lot more kind of honestly respectable voices. The most prominent one, I think, recently was Tim Bezbachenko, of course, the former Columbus and Toronto GM, who was like, I think the Pro Rel moment might be coming up soon.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So, I don't know. And kind of like what you're just saying with like Maurer and Evans and some of the threads they went on about the league just kind of, paralyzing itself until 2026. And I think Evans was kind of going at this more succinctly, where it was just like, like what do they think is going to happen? What do they, people are already like, it's not, 2001 or whatever anymore. I mean, like people in America know about the World Cup and know about soccer and stuff like that. What sort of awareness do they think a World Cup in this day and age is really going to raise? What needle is going to be moved?
The rumors of the calendar change too.
Right.
Oh, yeah, that's right. That also kind of reared its head this week, but along with the pro rel thing.
So maybe there is a big radical change coming. I mean, the big
there needs to be something shook up.
Well, I mean, like the big hope, obviously, from every billions of dollars being invested into U.S. soccer right now is that the World Cup here becomes a cultural moment of some kind. But, I don't
think cultural moments happen.
Well,
anymore,
that's what I was going to say. It's like, it's not like that. It's like they're going to rely on like one like idiot streamer to go yell something racist there for that to become like a big moment of the event.
The two cultural moments this year were fucking Hawk Tua and the Big Justice.
And they'll both be there.
And you know that there's dozens of unread emails from RBNY to Big Justice's family begging them to show up, saying, please, we can have a Aramark cookie.
And you know that the Rizzler answered the first Mets email.
No luck. But yeah, if to the extent that there is a best case scenario for RBNY and like New York soccer in general, I think it's that NYCFC Stadium opens in 2027. They get a new push and sort of like a new refreshed identity, maybe even a little bit. And that around the same time, the Red Bulls are sold and get a refresh and a recommitment to try to split the metro area in half. Because I do think that it's like a unique potential split here for, I mean, like being in Jersey will ding the Red Bulls no matter what, I think a little bit. But like Flushing is like not a very convenient place for a lot of people in the area to get to either. Like you could like split the metro like right in half in theory. And there is still a potential latent Red Bulls Metro Stars fan base that is getting older and getting less in touch every single day. But I think if some new owner or enterprising person wanted to have like a total relaunch of the Red Bulls and try to embrace more of the like weekly ritual of going to games, that moment is the moment that it would have to happen, is when NYCFC opens their new stadium.
I have a proposal.
Okay.
James Dolan buys New York Red Bulls and makes a 18,500 person stadium with a collapsible roof that can play both soccer and basketball. And we play there and we also play where the Knicks play. And that's
I'm rejecting that proposal pretty quickly
because you want Todd Bowley to buy the team.
Well, true. Yeah.
I'll do it only if James Dolan opens every game with his band.
Yeah, exactly. He plays the Bulls on Parade.
Yeah. This is making me realize though that in 2027 Red Bull Arena will be 17 years old. So
yeah, that was actually a thing in whatever another, I think it was a subreddit thread where somebody made a good point about just like among everything else. I mean, yeah, the stadium is 15 years old now and starting to look it in some parts. Mind you, I mean, that's been a little bit of like the weirdness in the purgatory of the club the last few years, is that they have been making some investments in the stadium. Some of them are actually good. Some of them are like, a sound system that's way too loud and all that shit. But
don't forget club seats coming 2025.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, that's going to be weird. But so they are conscious of that, but it is also just like, the idea of RBA as like the cathedral, or I mean, we were talking about it even like, 3 or 4 years ago, that it was still kind of an intimidation factor, and that this felt like a pretty heavy place for opposing teams to come to. And I think some of that disappearing is because the team itself is just bad, obviously. But some of it is also that just through a combination of both RBA getting a little bit older and losing some of that sheen, and then just, other buildings in the league looking,
well, I was going to say, when you copy RBA enough times, you end up
Cincinnati is like a dead copy of RBA.
I was going to say, when you copy it enough times, you end up making some improvements to the original design, presumably, right?
Yeah. I will say, like, during, like, when NYCFC came on the scene in 2015 and the more alarmist or, like, doomer people being like, oh, are the Red Bulls going to be obsolete? You know, like, are they going to move or, like, contract? Like, the one thing is, like, the stadium is, like, 5 years old, guys. You know, like, it's you know.
You're not going anywhere.
Yeah, you're not going anywhere. But once you hit 17, 20, 25 years old, like...
Then it becomes on the table.
Well, yeah, maybe the easiest out is just sort of to contract. Now, what would they do with the training facility? I don't know. But
and they also don't own the land anymore, too.
Well, that makes it even easier. Yeah.
Exactly.
How long was that lease for?
Well, it's like, I think
It might be a 99-year lease.
Yeah, and they could always just buy it back, I think, according to the
I mean,
Okay.
Chicago left Bridgeview after like a decade. Yeah.
Is that so? Like 20 years? Is that like an actual reasonable time to like consider
Yeah, I
other
think
stadium options?
in this era, maybe I think like stadiums are.
If it were like a little bit more expensive stadium, I would say no. But like, yeah, 20 years, like the Braves left their stadium after 20 years.
Yeah, the lifespan's really gone down, especially for kind of like smaller venues, you know, including like indoor
The
arenas
Rangers
and stuff.
left their stadium after 20 years.
Yeah.
You know, and like, yeah, they've spent a couple $1 million on like new pyro and stuff, but it's not so much that I could see them getting, you know, totally stuck into improving it.
Well, yeah,
We'll see.
even just mentioning Cincinnati just now as kind of a, you know, at least sort of outline copy of RBA, but, you know, when you know, look a little bit more in focus, it's just, yeah, a little bit more substantial. I mean, RBA, yeah, at this point, like, you know, the concrete blocks, you know, that the stands are up on, and just, you know, everything kind of being, you know, unfortunately at the top, kind of an erector set and chain link fence, like that kind of feels a little bit crappier than what you're starting to see around the rest of even MLS, let alone compared to, you know, bigger leagues.
Still
And-
top
I don't know.
of venues in MLS. They're really crappy. Even the new venues are crappy in MLS, though. That's the thing.
fucking DC?
Yeah, like DC. I'm
DC's
thinking.
crappy.
That's not even new
Like,
anymore.
that's exactly what I was thinking.
Philly. Okay, so stadiums that are definitely worse are New England,
Philly,
Philly,
Charlotte, DC.
DC, Dallas.
Miami now.
But that won't last, I don't think. Stadiums, and then like Chicago is like marginal because, like, you know,
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's Soldier Field now.
Colorado.
But I guess maybe it's better to list stadiums that are definitely better.
actually better.
So we'll say like Home Depot Center. Home Depot Center.
Go ahead.
Home Depot
Yeah.
Center. I think still probably, you know, top.
Apparently the San Jose stadium is already pretty shitty from what
Really?
I've heard. Yeah.
LAF LAFC Stadium
Yeah.
is
Looks
better.
nice.
Do they
Portland.
Cincinnati,
I was gonna say, do they have grass in
Portland,
Portland now? Because if that's the case, then it's definitely better.
Yeah.
Cincinnati, Portland, Minnesota, St. Louis.
Yeah, St. Louis looks real nice.
You said Nashville?
Columbus's new one does not look bad.
Oh, I think
don't
it looks
know.
kind of generic. But
It looks
yeah.
a little generic, but it looks like
But not better
Fine.
than RBA.
maybe it's tied. I don't know.
I feel like stadiums look better in pictures than they look in person, though. Often.
I'd say Orlando is probably a push. I'm up to 8. Nashville, I don't know. I haven't been to.
Too big.
Houston, I think, is about the same.
Yeah.
It's not better, but I would say it's about the same. And like the amenities and stuff are better, I will say. And so that gets
Toronto
us.
and Montreal are probably pushes.
Does Austin have a
Austin's
good
look kind of
stadiums, like-
nice.
Yeah, Austin looks
Yeah.
nice.
I think
Yeah.
we're up to like 10 to 12 stadiums now that are at least equal.
So we're
or
mid-table
like,
at this
point. Go figure.
Just like, yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, that even makes me think more pessimistically. If it's 2028 and NYCFC just had a successful launch of their new stadium, they're all 100% electric stadium. I have to go to like events for work now where I have to hear to the Economic Development Corporation talk about this damn thing. So
Oh my god.
yeah, and so if they have like a successful launch of their stadium and the Red Bulls are still sort of tottering along and not doing great, and the league gets more anxious about wanting to sell them, that's the point where you wonder, like, maybe the league starts entering Chivas mode and thinking it's contracting an easier way to get out of this than trying to get someone to buy this thing. If 18-year-old, 19-year-old Red Bull Arena is starting to really show its wear and tear. the other X factor is like, when is all that stuff in front of the stadium going to get built out? It is slowly getting there, but if it's still sort of a uncanny little
Gravel pit.
that's not going to help either. So I guess that's a glimpse at a best case scenario and maybe even a contraction scenario if things don't right themselves soon. But I don't know.
Playoff predictions. What's your bracket looking like?
I've got non-C going all the way. I'm a non-C boy.
I think it'd be really funny actually if we won this whole thing because I have no emotional connection to this team at all. You know.
I mean, I feel like it's become like a recurring joke for us every playoffs the last few years, where it's just like, first off, yes, it would be pretty funny if they went all the way, and B, like, they might as well just go all the way in a season like this if they've,
That's like the
always
NYCFC
ended
Cup,
up
right?
stalling out in the seasons that were actually
They're
good.
going to get to
so.
the cup, and then we're going to find out that Sandra Schwartz booked a unrefundable trip for his wedding anniversary. And he's like, guys, I really can't get out of
It's
this.
the opposite of the Forsberg issue.
Yeah.
They're gonna make up an injury picked up in like a coaching friendly,
His
so
wife-
that he can
his
skip out
wife's-
for family stuff.
Yeah, his wife's cousin has a wedding that he just cannot get out of. So, yeah, that's all right, Sandro. Do what you need to do.
He was not asked to be a master immediately. So
Yeah. I have the Yankees in 6. That's what I'm going to say.
yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's no reason we should win this series, and quite frankly, it would be a kind of a disgrace to the soccer gods if we beat a team as good and respectable as Columbus. So I don't know. So sorry if I'm not jumping on the bandwagon for this.
I will even go as far to say that, sorry for the good of the league a little bit, but I think the league really needs the Eastern Conference final to be Miami versus Columbus.
Yeah.
Maybe Cincinnati is okay.
Right.
But if it's not one of those 3 teams and you get a random bumfuck team in there, like
If they don't match
Fucking Charlotte.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean,
Charlotte.
honestly, like Miami versus like, one of the non, WWE teams that's actually good, is like a pretty good litmus test for where the league is, and would be a nice little like landmark result in the league's history. Again, not to be all support the league about it, but yeah.
Do you know who is in second place in the Western Conference?
San Jose.
No.
They're bottom.
It's like the worst.
Very foreign league to you. Jesus.
The LA Galaxy made it up to second place.
Wow, we were
Yeah,
just
they had a good
talking
year.
about that.
They had a pretty good year.
Wow.
Well,
That's
okay.
what I was thinking of.
They
California.
had a pretty good year now that they're finally signing, like,
Right.
making actual good scouted signings instead of just sticking Chicharito out there.
Clearly,
every day.
that's
Like,
clearly what I meant when I was invoking them the other day.
Right.
Dare I say the Western Conference is looking a little Lindy out here. We have LA Galaxy, Real Salt Lake, Seattle, and Houston up near
Wow.
the top. Well, and then LA is at the top, very top.
Did
but,
SKC make it?
No.
No.
Wow, San Jose had 25.
That means it's definitely staying
San
another
Jose
5
had
years.
25 losses this season.
Yeah,
Almeida vindicated.
I do think the if Miami is not playing Columbus or Cincinnati in at the end of this thing for the East, it's going to be really hard to get eyeballs on this thing. But further to the point, there's absolutely no reason that Montreal and Atlanta should be bothering to have a ticket to this thing.
Yeah.
And for that matter, us or NYCFC as well. It's
Is there a
ridiculous.
pathway for us and NYCFC to play each other,
Let me see.
like in the finals?
Oh yeah, if we both win, we play next round.
Okay, I
And
hope
my
we
The
CFC.
most
lose. Okay, I
important
want
derby ever.
You know what? Now it is going to happen. Now it will happen. They're playing Cincinnati and we're playing Columbus. So it's either
Oh no!
God, that would be so cursed.
the last time.
Why can't it just be Mets Guardians?
The last time that something like this happened was when we were playing Toronto and City was playing. No, we were playing Montreal and I think City was playing Toronto. And it was either going to be an all Canada or all New York. And then it was a New
Was
York
that
versus
the
Canada.
question nosebleed
I think
season?
so, yeah. And I think it ended up being all Canada instead of all New York. So maybe we'll get it this year. Who knows? That would suck, because then I would I have to go to the game on November 23rd? I think I'm going to be already flying, or maybe not. I don't know.
Fucking clutch
Yeah.
opportunity to miss a
Me
game.
and Sandro on the same page here. Well, anything else?
I guess we'll touch base with everyone after the big series.
Oh, I was chuckling earlier in this episode. We did the thing that an American soccer podcast, I think, inevitably does, which is talk about the state of American soccer at large.
I mean, that's been a big theme for us for some time now, I would say.
It's Alex!